and Tim, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
Appreciate you both making some time today to discuss, once again, this is part two of a series we've done on cybersecurity. For our viewers at home, we're joined today by Karlee Garcia, who's a private client relationship manager over at Black Cloak. Some of you may already be familiar with Black Cloak. We did an episode on them earlier this year, and I was thinking, we've done around 14 or 15 episodes of our podcast, and this is the second one we've done on cybersecurity. And I'm sure there's some people wondering, hey, you cover a lot of ground. We talk about tax planning, estate planning, investment planning, why all the focus on cybersecurity? And I think it's really important because cybersecurity planning just wasn't nearly as important, talked about, addressed 10 years ago. And when things come up, something like the big beautiful bill earlier this year, with tax planning, you have to address it, but it doesn't come up that often. Cybersecurity has really evolved so much. There is a new scam that we're reading about every single day, and it's constantly evolving. And there's new threats that people weren't aware of, a week ago that they need to be aware of now. And so I think what goes along with it is because it's so new, people are more, underprepared in addressing this issue than all the other planning areas of their life. Um, and we're joined today by Tim McCabe, who's founder of McCabe and Associates, came out of retirement to help us with this podcast. Second thing that we think is really important and why we wanted to do a part two on this series is, when we start these relationships with a company like Black Cloak and we bring our clients to them, we have a good understanding of how they operate and what they offer to our clients. But clients will ask from time to time, it's a really good question. Are you using them for yourself? It really hits home with people more if you actually go through their process, you engage with their team, you know how they operate. And so Tim was a really great example of somebody, we work with business owners who transition out of their work life into retirement life. And when they do that, sometimes they're dealing with, having, personal devices at work, and now they're moving to using personal devices purely at home. Their financial situation may change as part of a transition. And so when that change occurs, it's important that they're reviewing, all these different areas to see what should I be doing now that I, maybe wasn't doing or I wasn't covering when I was working. And so Tim kind of does the favor of, kind of engaging with Black Cloak, going through their process and working with their team to kind of work on his own cybersecurity planning. And so that's really why we brought him on today. And, Dad, maybe I'll hand it over to you to maybe just give some comments on, your experience with Black Cloak, some of the things that you talked to them about, worked through, with you and Mom, and kind of what you noticed along the way.
Good. Well, thanks, George. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Particularly in my generation, this cybersecurity is absolutely a new threat, and it is something that we all read about. And George brought it to our attention, the attention of the office earlier this year, and was critically important and did a great podcast with the group from Black Cloak. But as George and I were talking about it, I think, understanding the problems that may arise, and we do read about them daily, and we think the general public does as well. But the second concern I share with George is, like a lot of things in life, just inertia. People are saying, yeah, I understand it's a problem, but I have been Privacy Guard, I've got LifeLock, and I've got that all covered. And I really don't think people really have they've just seen the tip of the iceberg as how serious this problem can be, and that a lot of areas need to be covered. So George and I talked about it. We thought we would want to have this follow-up. And as George said, someone who has been through the process, which my wife Meg and I have been in recent months, and share that findings and our experience with people, and with the goal being, this isn't an overwhelming task to take on, and yet the reward is just priceless as far as I'm concerned. And I can skip to the ending of this story and tell you that my wife and I are both sleeping much more comfortably knowing that we've got this protection in place for all of our devices. And so Meg and I each have three devices. We have our laptops, we have iPads, and we have cell phones. And so we talked to the people at Black Cloak. I enrolled in their program, and then they have what the next step is what's called an onboarding program. And so we both sat through that process, and I will tell you, it was pain-free. The first initial session I think took less than 60 minutes. And not only did we walk away with a lot accomplished, but also we got a great education. And the individuals that we've had throughout these onboarding sessions have been extremely helpful, very knowledgeable, very patient, which comes in handy with someone like myself. And so we thought we would just kind of share the details of that experience with you. And then Karlee, who can kind of maybe do a little deeper dive as we hit some of the points that were covered in the onboarding session. I think you'll find this to be very enlightening. And our hope, George and our hope, and the advisors for McCabe and Associates, hope that you take this opportunity to pursue it and at least have a discussion and know what it's capable of providing. The first onboarding session is what they refer to as this privacy and exposure review. And as I recollect, Karlee, I think the first thing they did is ask for our emails. Meg and I each have two emails. I have a business and a personal, and she has two personal emails. We provided that. And they also asked for information, cell phone numbers, addresses, et cetera. And I believe, Karlee, the first thing they looked at was for this, this what's called the dark web review. And maybe you can touch on exactly, they came back and there wasn't anything alarming with what they found, but there were a number of locations, websites that had our information that we really didn't need for them to have any longer. And it was just recommended that we kind of clean that up. So Karlee, maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a pleasure and wonderful getting to talk to both of you. So to talk about the privacy and exposure reviews a little bit more, I know that you mentioned that we collect data around you and your wife to begin with. So again, emails, phone numbers, names, things of that nature. There's two reasons why we're doing that. One is called a data broker removal service that we offer. So for those of you that don't know what a data broker is you can think of things like back in the day, there used to be these wonderful things called phone books, right? That had everybody's information on them. You could look them up alphabetically. So it's really the same idea, except it's on the internet and anyone can access it. So think of pages like 411.com, whitepages.com, or if you're familiar with sales, there are things like Zoom Info. Most of them are not nefarious. Some of them are certainly, but most of them are not. And the reason why they are out there and they're able to sell our information is because it's not widely regulated by the US government. So it's a big money-making scheme, but that puts you at risk, right? By having your home information out there, your phone number, your email addresses, this is just the beginning of what nefarious actors can use to harm you in financial or even physical ways. So we start taking those down, and we're able to do that by grabbing your personal information. The second part of that, and why we need your personal information, is so that we can start scrubbing the dark web for you. So obviously, everyone knows what the dark web is. It's not a great place, not anywhere that you want your personal information. However, everyone's on it, unfortunately. It's just part of the world. So we ask for that information up front so that we can hone in and pinpoint you specifically as a human and not be sharing information with you that's not necessarily yours if you have a common name or if you have like a junior or senior situation in your family. So it's really more or less just to hone in and then also get you enrolled in that dark web and data broker removal service that we have.
And as I understand it, Karlee, number one, that action or assistance has greatly reduced the amount of spam phone calls we have. Is that tied into what we're talking about, which is that in and of itself is a huge a plus. But secondly, I will mention that we have also continued since we enrolled to get these emails occasionally about concerns that are not our specific information, but just certain warnings to be on the lookout if we had purchased something from this party or whatever. So it is an ongoing process, an ongoing monitoring, which is critically important for people to understand. The next step was the home Wi-Fi system. So Meg and I, we have two homes, one in Chicagoland, one in Michigan. And I know in past years, when people first started getting, home Wi-Fis, people would just put their name on, name it under their own name and then use their phone number, which at that time was a hard line, and talk about an easy nut to crack as far as security reasons. So we provided Black Cloak in the onboarding session. They looked at our Wi-Fi system in both locations and put our mind at ease by, let's discuss these portals, Karlee, exactly what they're doing and on this ongoing monitoring that goes on in regard to our home Wi-Fi systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the home Wi-Fi, you're absolutely correct. So, during the privacy and exposure review, that's one thing that we'll ask for you. If you are at your current location, you can just very easily hop into the application and say, "Yes, I'm here," and it will grab that IP address for you. So, every IP address is specific to your home and your home router. And what we're doing is essentially scanning that IP address and looking for something called open ports. So, if you want to visualize this as not a computer, not the internet, if a bad actor was trying to break into your home, they would go around all the windows and wiggle the windows and they would wiggle the doors and try to see how they can get in. If they're all locked, then that's great. They move on to the next house. However, if there is one window that's slightly wiggly and they can get it open and get in, they're going to use that window, right? So for us, we are doing these scans and we're looking for what is called open ports. If we can get into the open port, there's a very good chance that the bad actor can get into the open port. From there, we're going to do an additional layer of what we call pen testing or penetration testing, where we're actually trying to break into that port and see if we can do anything, cause any harm, do anything bad in there. So I will say that 1 in 3 homes have computers that are infected with malware. So this is a real serious issue. You might already have something in your home and you're not aware of it. We will download as an EDR on your computer and we'll scan and make sure that there's nothing nefarious on your computer already. And if there is, we'll work with you to mitigate those problems as well.
And I will tell you that process took hardly any time at all. Not that it wasn't a competent job, but I mean, it was a matter of minutes. And they came back, said, "We're happy to report that there is no malware. We found no portals." And again, just instantaneously, your level of comfort goes up immensely in just that area. Um, I'm also going to touch while we're talking about Wi-Fi is this VPN, which I found fascinating. So I've got my cell phone here and I've got my iPad and I'm trying, I may or may not have my laptop, but we're at an airport or a public location, whether it be a hotel. And, we've all read about the concerns about using public Wi-Fi. And with a touch of 2 buttons on my phone, I can take care of that problem. Um, so that this VPN system, which is I described as an extra tunnel or layer of protection, which would allow me at a hotel or an airport not having to worry about being on a public Wi-Fi where bad things can happen. Can you touch on that a little bit, a little more explanation of the obvious or to the person, typical lay person that may not understand how VPN works?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, a VPN is like a private tunnel, right? So to your point, you don't necessarily want to join public Wi-Fi. There's a few reasons for that. It has been proven and a very successful tactic for these bad actors to um, basically hack into the public Wi-Fi, and then if you join, you're under attack, essentially. So we offer a VPN, which is essentially a private tunnel. So when you are in an airport or you're at a hotel, all you do is press a button within our application. It turns the VPN on. If you're out of the country, we have various different points of presence that we can activate from the VPN. So it's not just US based at all. And then from there, you're in this private tunnel and you are able to access the internet and browse the internet and go to the websites that you want to go to and you're protected. And then once you get to where you're going on the internet, it doesn't say, hey, this person is coming from, DW Airport or what have you. This person is coming from this protected tunnel. So it's really, really hard to trace back to yourself or your device.
Terrific. Speaking of applications, the other one that's on the phone, and again, if Tim McCabe can follow this, I can assure everybody it is very easy and straightforward. But another application is the QR code scanner, which I found fascinating because I struggled early on with the QR codes on menus and park benches and everything else, and on your phone as you're logging in. But I started reading in recent years about how the malware and everything can get downloaded if you scan a QR code. And I'm thinking, well, then I'm just going to not use them, which is ridiculous. So again, as simple as pushing a button on the phone, this QR code scanner, all you do is you hold your cell phone up to the QR code. And I use a term, they give you the AOK that it's legit and you can use it. Can you touch on that, Karlee?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing a great job explaining these. But yeah, the QR code is exactly that. It's just a button on your application that you can click and it will scan the QR code for you and then let you know if it is a malicious link or not. So we are basically cross-referencing those. There's lots and lots and lots of databases out there that have all of these malicious links, and obviously new ones are being created all the time. So it's a static list. But we're just cross-referencing that and making sure that it's not a known malicious link or it doesn't have the attributes of a malicious link. And we're just ensuring that you are good to go so that you're not getting into a situation that you don't want to be in.
George and I were talking briefly after in preparation for this call, and he mentioned that somebody had just said, "Well, I'm just not going to scan QR codes." And I was reminded, my wife and I were in a parking lot at 11:30 at night one night, and we had to use the QR code to get out of
Yeah.
the parking garage. So this denial, I'm never going to use it. That's how I'll protect myself. A is unreasonable, and B, it's unnecessary when you have Black Cloak. And so those are the apps. You also mentioned that we have not yet enrolled in it, but there was a suggestion to look at these. Is it Nomo? Help me with the robocallers and the scam.
Yeah, so within the application, this is a paid service, so you will have to pay for this on top of
Right.
your Black Cloak subscription. But Nomo Robo and RoboKiller are two vetted, tried and true applications that Black Cloak will put their name behind, and they put it in our application, so it's right there and easy enough for you to reference. But these are spam blockers, really. So they are looking for, again, known phone numbers that aren't necessarily known to you in your phone. You can use it on an international scale as well, which is really nice if you have multiple homes in different countries. And it really is just going to reduce the calls or the amount of calls that get through to you. You can, of course, say, yep, this is a good number. Nope, this is a bad number, and it will continue that service. But I kind of wanted to go back to what we first started talking about, and you touched upon it as well with the data broker removal. Because we are shrinking your attack surface or your digital footprint, whatever you want to say, by removing these data broker profiles, that is also going to affect the amount of spam calls that you are receiving because if there's not an endless amount of information out there about you, it's a little bit harder. People have to work a little bit harder to grab that information, so it's not an easy kind of scrape and go. So between the DBR and then the Nomo Robo, and then also we have tons of information on different settings depending on what type of phone you have. There are different call screening settings that the team can help you out with. So there's a lot of different resources we have that can help you combat the spam calls.
And we will kind of wrap things up in a minute or two about the concierge service, which
Yeah.
we think is critically important.
Mhm.
But I also want to touch on these actionable items. I think only one of them I was really familiar with about things to protect yourselves these days. But in this onboarding session, they ran down this checklist and starting with the credit bureaus and freezing your credit. And just, it was no nonsense. If you haven't frozen your credit, you got to do it. Just plain and simple. There is no reason not to. It can certainly be unfrozen, but the risks associated with not freezing the credit. So we went and did that, Meg and I on our own in a matter of minutes, but that was brought to our attention on the onboarding session. The other one, which I was not familiar with, is this check systems, which is basically you can go in and go to that website, you freeze that, and no one, as I understand it, Karlee, can open up a bank account in your name once that's frozen. Again, you're going to switch bank accounts, you're going to make a move, you go in, you unfreeze it, you do your business, you go back in and freeze it. Was not familiar with that. We did that immediately. And again, these are easy action items to take. The other one was the IRS PIN number, and George and I are very familiar. We're hearing from various parties about how there's been identity theft and tax related matters, people filing for unemployment benefits or filing for refunds. I have a great CPA. I'm a CPA. George is a CPA. We have a CPA do our taxes. Bounced it off of him, this IRS PIN number, which I was not familiar with. And I thought maybe the reason I didn't have it, but our accountant said, no, you and Meg should probably file for those. So those three actionable items, were just brought to our attention. I was not familiar with them. They were an easy fix, but critically important. So I wanted to cover those. And the last I was personally somewhat familiar with, my wife was not. I don't know that most people are, but it's these password managers. Now, through work, we use LastPass, and that's been a very helpful, safe, and secure method of retaining passwords that you never want to use duplicate ones or write them on a piece of paper. But we've also were introduced as an option for our personal. As George said, I'm pretty much retired now. But this one password is another particular password manager, and it's driven home the point that I have to use that on my personal end as well. And so we're going to kind of separate the LastPass and the one password. But so that, and then if you wouldn't mind touching on, Karlee, about the importance of MFA, this, multi-factor authorization. And specifically, I was also enlightened to hear that the majority of the websites I go to, I have make sure that I have MFA. So there's kind of this two layers of security, but that to date, I mostly get texts on my phone, but now the bad actors have kind of found a way to kind of crack that one. So you're suggesting more using authenticators. Can you just spend a minute or two discussing that MFA issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So, MFA stands for multi-factor authentication, and it truly is just that. You can set it up on most websites or programs that house any sort of sensitive information. And it's one thing for you to have your username and password, as I'm sure, Tim, you found on your privacy and exposure review. There are lots of people that might have your username and passwords, or some might find on their
Right.
privacy and exposure reviews. So we're, to your point, at kind of a time in our lives where that's not good enough anymore. So then we move to, all right, we're going to start sending out text messages. And that's all well and good. That works for a little while. But unfortunately, bad actors are also really, really smart. They're just not using their intelligence for good. So they have now figured out that, hey, if we have their phone number and we know for a fact that this 2FA goes to their phone number, we can set that as a secondary, and we can put in our own phone number and have the text go to us and not them. So there was kind of a breakdown there. So now enter to your point, these authentication applications, like Authy is a good example. And essentially what that is it will create a code. It's on a timer, and a lot of these large companies or what have you, so think like Google, all of them, they usually have their own proprietary one, but the multi-factor authenticator, sorry, will send you a code that is time sensitive. So usually they last like 30, 45 seconds, and then they change and they generate a new code. And you also have to have a sign in, a login, all that fun stuff to access it. So it's again just another layer of, hey, this is who you say you are. You're about to access really sensitive data. And it is just another layer of protection that kind of combats the issue if they have your username, password, personal information.
Terrific. Good. So in summary, George and Karlee, we found that the experience was extremely helpful, comforting. It was easy. I wanted to touch on the concierge service, but the key word here is this is a continuous process. This is not, we signed up, we went through this, and we'll see you in a year. I know from experience just in the last couple of months, we're getting these emails, we're getting these, dark web alerts. This is an ongoing process. I believe our home Wi-Fi systems are being scanned each week. And so, and there's just, I think the all of us have talked about how, the cybersecurity professionals are building taller walls and the bad actors are just building taller ladders. So this is an ongoing battle that's going to continue to go on. And so an individual like myself, or I think most people, are not going to be able to stay on top of the new tactics that are being used. So in addition to the ongoing monitoring and so forth, this concierge service, which is basically, 24/7 phone number, which I have reached out to on 3 different occasions already. And it is not where you call a number and they say call back Monday morning, or you wait 6 hours and you don't hear back from people. I think the longest I had to wait for a return call was between 8 to 12 minutes, and it wasn't anything that pressing. And they were very helpful. One of them was as simple as it was showing that 2 of our devices were not secure. And the reason being is because Apple had an update and we hadn't updated our iPhones or our iPads yet, but something as simple as that. So I found them to be extremely responsive, very helpful. I haven't had any disappointments as far as getting the information that I need. And so, in a nutshell, George explained in great deal, along with the people from Black Cloak, the importance of identifying this as a real problem. It's going to be up to each individual to determine how to approach it. Again, I'm not bashing Privacy Guard and LifeLock. I've used Privacy Guard for a lot of years, but as George often says, we don't know what we don't know. And I can tell you my experience with these onboarding sessions and my experience thus far for my wife and I with Black Cloak has been top notch. And it just does bring you an immense sense of comfort. I don't know if that's because we're older, but I think of anybody of any age would find this to be very comforting with all of the horror stories that you're hearing about. So, George, is there anything, or Karlee, that you can think of that I didn't touch on?
Yeah, I just want, if you don't mind, I just want to touch upon what this concierge service is as well.
Please.
So just for the viewers listening at home, essentially how the full cycle works is that you decide you want to work with Black Cloak, right? Like Tim decided, did his research, was like, yep, this is the service for me. Um, we grab a little bit of information in the beginning, have that privacy and exposure review where we are going over things like the data broker removal. We are telling you what we found on the dark web. So that includes passwords that are exposed, that are out there. Sometimes we find social security numbers, sometimes we find credit card information. So there's a lot. Some are worse than others. There are some that it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you've been, you haven't been hacked yet. And then from there, to your point also, right? Like it's a marathon, not a sprint. So similarly with the data broker removal, everything in the realm of cybersecurity, to your point, people are adapting, people are changing all the time. It's never going to be like, all right, you talked to us once and you're completely secure. Yeah, we tightened up a few things, but there is an ever evolving, constant change that's happening here that needs to be addressed. The second part that I want to touch on is that concierge service. And to your point, I think it's the most valuable thing that we offer here at Black Cloak. So not only are you getting the computer protection, you're getting the phone protection, you're getting the Wi-Fi protection, but you also have like a small army of humans here that are willing and able to roll up their sleeves and get kind of into it with you when things go wrong. So if you're ever in an incident, we have a awesome security team that will hop on the phone with you and walk you through step by step, like if you're actively being hacked or if you're actively being extorted, anything along those lines. We will walk you hand in hand, go through everything. Similarly, or not similarly, I should say, if you're getting a weird text message, please send it to us. We want to review it. We will click on that link in an isolated area where nothing's going to happen. We'll tell you if it's bad or not. If you are buying new security cameras and you're looking for ones that connect to the Wi-Fi, but you want to make sure that you have the proper settings or the most secure, like anything in the realm of privacy, we're happy to help you. We can set up blind trust or help. We can't help you set up blind trusts. If you have a private plane and you don't want people to know where you're flying, we can help you with things like that. I think one of the statistics that really kind of jumped out to me was that Americans lost a total of $16.8 billion last year due to being hacked. And that's not necessarily even looking at high net worth individuals, that's Americans in total. So this is obviously a huge problem, but about 30% of high net worth individuals have experienced a hack in the last year, which is huge. But even more so, 38% of them don't have a cybersecurity plan in place. So when things go bump in the middle of the night, who are you going to call? And we would really love to be the person that you call and think that there's a good opportunity here to help a lot of people.
And as George said at the outset, um, it's one thing to educate you about what our views are on Black Cloak, but having me come on and tell you about my real world experiences, I think, and we stand ready to, if any of our clients want to talk to me in person about that or in detail about it, I'd be happy to. But that was the importance of putting this together today, and really appreciate your help with it, Karlee. George, anything else you think we should touch on?
Yeah, I just that was great context for myself and for our clients, but I just took some notes along the way of what I thought were the highlights. And I think you're both spot on, particularly you, Karlee, when you said I think our concierge service is really, the highlight of what we do. Because I hear stories from clients all the time, we're analyzing, their social security benefit and they were trying to call social security. They were on the phone for an hour and they just thought, well, I'll just circle back, or they're trying to focus on these other planning points of their life, and they're working with these bigger companies that are dealing with, millions of people, and they are just getting shifted from department to department. And I think, what's great about Black Cloak. I think you even mentioned you called them on a weekend once, right?
Right.
And I think the peace of mind premium is higher in cybersecurity than it is, even with tax planning or estate planning. Like it's important to have your estate planning documents. It's important to have like a great accountant, but you know, paying a little bit more because I think cost, in addition to inertia, is the biggest reason why people don't engage with this. They just think I don't need to pay for it, but when you know that. As Tim highlighted, they're proactively reaching out on items that you weren't aware of. You have access to them anytime that you want. And cybersecurity is also one where, if something comes up, with your estate plan or tax plan, you can normally say, hey, I need to address this, but I'll get around to it. With a cybersecurity event, sometimes you don't have that luxury. You can't be waiting on the phone for an hour. You can't wait until they open up on Monday. So I think that is absolutely critical. And that's why you pay more. And that's why I think in the world of cybersecurity, it's worth it to pay a little bit extra to get that peace of mind because it's the best bang for your buck in that regard. Some of the other things that Tim, you were mentioning along the way, about I think some people just take this approach of certain items that they're just going to avoid using QR codes or they're going to avoid getting set up online for paperless statements. And as the world evolves, it's getting harder to do that. I'm not saying it's going to get to a point where people can't do it that way. But we're seeing with like a lot of the investment companies we work with, they're saying, hey, you need to get an online account and get paperless statements, and we're going to start charging you $10 a month. Same thing with the QR code. You mentioned about the garage, situation. I couldn't get out without scanning the QR code. So that's worked up until now. But as the world gets more digital, I just think, getting ahead of this issue is better than just waiting until you're forced to make a change and then you make a mistake because of it. So I thought that was critical. I was going to use the same phrase that Tim used, you don't know what you don't know. Just something as simple as, updating your passwords. It's really hard, especially for someone like Tim who's just retired, who did business for 40 years. Imagine the number of websites that he's used over 40 years. And people forget the websites that they used 20 years ago. And they've got all these accounts that they have set up, usernames and passwords. And probably at that point, a lot of people were using the same exact password for everything. And they're just hanging out there. So trying to tackle that yourself and just saying, well, I'll just update the ones that I'm using now, that can be a mistake. And so I think this, ignorance is bliss. People kind of skate through life saying, I'll just wait to see if something happens and hopefully it doesn't, can be a little bit risky. I think that something like that Nomo Robo service is awesome. Again, speaks to the proactivity. And I think someone could, hear about that service. And Karlee mentioned, well, that's an additional thing that's kind of a third party service you'll have to pay for. But I hear from people all the time on something like that where they're saying, man, I'm getting all these spam calls or these robocalls. I wish there was like an easy way to fix this. There is. And so even though it's like a quote unquote additional cost that you have to take on in order to fix that problem, the fact that someone's bringing that to your attention is valuable.
Yeah.
And then the final thing was that IRS PIN number is that, cybersecurity, it's a standalone planning area, but the fact that you brought Tim's attention, hey, this IRS PIN number, that's something that's valuable from a tax planning standpoint. So now you're bringing together different planning areas, under the cybersecurity umbrella. And that's, something huge that, we've really changed in the way that we do things. Now we acted more of what we call a virtual family office is just integrating all these different planning areas. Even if you're handling them extremely well in silos, if you're not communicating amongst, the different planning areas and the different professionals, there's just going to be gaps, no two ways about it. So I just think those to me were all the highlights. Again, not trying to, oversell, using a service like this, but I just think that, those are all reasons why people should seriously consider, taking a hard look at, what's going on with their cyber life.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that summary and synopsis. And you're absolutely right. And truthfully, with Black Cloak, even if we don't know or not know the answer, but maybe it's not in our realm, like we'll still point you in the right direction. This is a true blue cybersecurity concierge white glove service. There is no question too small. There's no question too big. We have subject matter experts, to your point, across all the different silos. And it's a great team. And I personally love working here. I love the work that we do. I love that we help people. And it's just been a great experience. And I'm really, really happy, Tim, that you had a great experience as well, because I know the team here works really hard and are truly dedicated to making sure that their members are safe and secure.
It shows, I can tell you that. So we were very, very impressed. So we're grateful for George bringing it to our attention, and we're grateful for Black Cloak to delivering on what they said they would. And I will tell you, it is extremely comforting to know that aspect of our life is being addressed as well as it can be addressed. It's an ongoing battle, but we feel fully armed at this point in time. So kudos to Black Cloak.
Thank you.
I think we can wrap on that. So again, Karlee, thank you very much for joining us, Dad. I really appreciate you taking some time to kind of talk through your experience. And it was a final note to our clients. I just was talking about integrating, your planning. Part of why we're bringing this to our clients' attention, it's not a service that we handle in-house. It's not a service that we get compensated for, but it's critically important because handling our clients' accounts and the data around those accounts is very, very sensitive information, and we want to be a part of those conversations. So it's gives us peace of mind to be able to not only refer to Black Cloak, but to be a part of the conversation with the client to say, hey, how can we get client A into a better situation, but also how can we be doing things better on our end? So I think it's great that we can kind of start these partnerships with companies like Black Cloak, and we really look forward to talking about it with people in the future. So with that, Karlee and Tim, thanks again for joining me today.
Yeah,
Our pleasure. Thanks, George.
Thanks.
Take care. Thanks, Karlee.
Thanks.